onto the NFC Championship game. 49ers Packers squaring off in California, of course. They met earlier in the season. It was a 37-8 win for San Francisco. This is a very, significantly different Packers side from the one that lost so heavily then, not least because they lost so heavily then. You look at a lot of the build-up to this game, a number of the players, particularly defensively, are making the point that that was a hell of a wake-up call. And if you look at how that unit has progressed since that game, it is dramatically different. We've spoken on this show a number of times, and I hold my hands up here and say, have been in that team of, this Packers is a strange old side. They just don't seem to gel and click. And how are they almost the number one seed in the NFC? How are they rolling on into the playoffs? And here they are now in the championship game. My position has changed a little bit after that win against Seattle.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Also, as far as that 37-8 shellacking is concerned, there is a school of thought that says that if you have a blowout and the two teams meet again, that the team that lost will learn more from that game than the team that won.
Right.
They'll have seen so many things that they can work on, whereas if you've just played a poor game, the 49ers will almost have to completely forget about everything that they saw from the Packers that day, whereas the Packers can work on things that they saw from the 49ers. It is a weird old Packers team. It feels like it shouldn't work, and yet it does. The defense started the season really well, kind of faded away, improved again. They're good. They're good at running the ball. In terms of Aaron Rodgers having weapons at receiver, he just doesn't really have them. They are made to look better than they are because Aaron Rodgers is such a sublime talent. I've said before, I think he's the greatest quarterback of his generation in terms of natural talent. And he is just dragging them kicking and screaming all the way to the NFC Championship game, which even when they started well, I thought there were just too many holes in this team. There were too many weaknesses. And I thought the Seahawks would beat them last week. I've been high on the Seahawks all season, but really, maybe I was getting it mixed up that if any team is just being dragged by one player, it's the Seahawks with Russell Wilson.
Yeah, and I think Wilson's line didn't do him any favors again. So in some respects, that accentuated the impact of the Packers pass rush. But I think that is a key thing here because we're talking about players that are suddenly stepping up at the right time and just building a real rhythm. The Smith brothers, Kenny Clark, they all look interesting, and it's a tougher line with the 49ers. I get that, but they were causing havoc against Seattle. That will clearly be part of their MO again. In terms of Rodgers and receptions and receiving options, of course, that is a big issue. I'd probably say two things to this. And Devontae Adams and that connection, as we saw ably demonstrated against the Seahawks, is going to be crucial here.
Yep.
And there's no reason, even with Sherman on Adams, which quite conceivably could happen, there's no reason to think that they can't connect strongly again. It's what happens if they do manage to shut Adams out or at least marginalize him. Is there enough around him? Now, that is, on the one hand, quite a clear issue. But then if there's a quarterback that's going to be able to get the most out of an indifferent bunch, it's in a game like this, it's Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I'm not sure any quarterback in the NFL is better at doing that than anyone else. Now, Aaron Rodgers, no player has a bigger chip on his shoulder in the NFL than Aaron Rodgers, which is kind of unusual when you are clearly one of the most talented players in the league, one of the best paid players in the league, one of the most high-profile players in the league, to have that chip on your shoulder. And he's always been that sort of person, and it just blew up when he was passed over by so many teams in the NFL draft and had to sit in the green room humiliated as the camera kept looking at him because he was the only player left, and people just passing on him, and he ended up at the Packers, and he really wanted to be a 49er.
Because he's a California boy, of course.
He grew up in Northern California, was desperate to be a 49er. They ended up, rolling with Alex Smith, and clearly they should have taken Aaron Rodgers, although, the argument could be that if he'd been with that 49ers team, maybe he wouldn't have had anywhere near the success, and he got to sit for 2 years behind Brett Favre, which was fantastic for him. But as someone who grew up loving the 49ers, Aaron Rodgers, there's probably nobody who dislikes them more right now because just that's the way that he is. It's not to be underestimated at this point, I think you make, that I think it's easy
to say, for people to say, well, okay, I get he's going to be fired up, but that's not really going to matter when it comes down to game time. If they're being out schemed, that he just can't find anybody open. If, again, going back to looking at specific players that can keep plays alive, that can improvise, that can somehow pull something out of the bag, Aaron Rodgers is on that shortlist of the best currently and arguably of all time in his position. So to have that constant motivation, in other words, to simplify what I'm saying, even if his offense isn't really gelling, he can still make plays happen, and he is going to be absolutely motivated to do that against the 49ers. No doubt about that whatsoever, for the reasons you've just said. That will be, just like Brady, after all these years, is still mightily knows how to joint that he was overlooked and dropped out. It sounds crazy when he's achieved what he's achieved, but he's the first to admit, it still drives me, it still motivates me now.
Aaron Rodgers has been someone who has been famously difficult to deal with, both for coaches and teammates.
Do you think that affects might affect his legacy a bit? Because he's not as likable on the surface level of character as other players.
Do you know what I think will affect his legacy? If, despite being perhaps the greatest talent of his generation, and often being surrounded by really good players, less so this year, ironically, that if he ends his career with one Super Bowl victory, when you compare with, obviously it's tough to compare with Brady because of what he did, but at least say compare with Peyton Manning, who got to numerous Super Bowls, won a couple, and the thing for Manning is, what stopped Manning from winning extra Super Bowls? Tom Brady in AFC Championship games, whereas Aaron Rodgers hasn't had that kind of brick wall exactly to come up against. So, I mean, his legacy is going to be what an incredible player, but it might be a little bit like, one knock you can have on Brett Favre, apart from the constant interceptions. And Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers is a far better quarterback than Brett Favre.
Hey, steady on.
Brett Favre should not have
Favre country.
Favre should not have been on that NFL all-time 100 list. Certainly not ahead of Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is a better quarterback than Brett Favre.
Give me that IOU back, Ben Isaacs.
It cannot be argued. Brett Favre somehow only won one Super Bowl, despite being surrounded by unreal talents. If Aaron Rodgers only wins one, then Packers fans, I think, would be like, well,
how did that just happen?
It feels unfair. Other fans, kind of, Ollie and I were talking before we went on air, like Bears fans can look at that and be like, it's not fair that you get Favre for all that time and then go straight to Aaron Rodgers. But that stretch is decades long, and the idea that you might win 2 Super Bowls in that stretch with 2 of the greatest of all time, I don't think it'll affect his legacy. I think even if he is a difficult person, he's not the fun guy that Peyton Manning is, it's going to be his incredible achievements, but it's whether is he going to get another ring? That's what I want to know.
Hope you enjoyed the Nat Coombs Show presented by Paddy Power Fantasy. There's plenty more where that came from. Just click subscribe to ESPN UK and you won't miss a trick.